effect of whether you use automatic bill pay or not on your credit score? So the answer is you use the automatic bill pay, as I do, for convenience, but you still have to pay in time. So automatic bill pay is not an intelligent bill pay. In other words, they're not going to force you to pay in time, which is when it might make a difference on your credit score. You can do whatever you want with automatic bill pay. It's for your own convenience, and for that you don't get any credit from the credit bureaus. So the answer is no. All right, so today we talk about property insurance. I think auto insurance will be part of this, and so renter's insurance. So we'll cover the sort of the gamut of the insurance stuff, and we'll go relatively quickly through this because it's mostly definitional, so I won't tax your attention too much on this. But the two important things that you care about with property insurance is property loss and liability. So liability is things that you do. It's your fault. So because you are through some actions that cause damage, negligent actions on your part, I should say, cause damage, will fall under liability. And of course, when you actually destroy somebody else's property, that's property loss. So those are the two things that you worry about. And then, of course, this idea of indemnity, which means that insured is entitled to payment from insurance company only if a loss has occurred. So otherwise you don't. And the amount of payment should be no greater. So this sort of feeds into this idea we've talked about in the beginning, that insurance is really a purely defensive play, a defensive strategy, and therefore the damage that you get reimbursed for can only equal the loss that the damage that you caused. That's the maximum that you'll get paid, no more. So okay, so insurable interest. You can only insure property in which you have some interest, economic or otherwise, right? So I cannot take out insurance on you, one of you in the class, because there is no direct link between me and you. So that won't be possible. Then the actual cash value is basically you calculate at most the depreciated value of the asset. Now, these days, pretty much all insurance contracts will give you the replacement value. So if you have a TV set and it's kind of gotten destroyed somehow, and then the insurance company will just simply allow you to buy something similar and pay you for it, pay to have it replaced at actuals. Subrogation, so these are definitions. I'm not going to read you the definitions, but go over it at your own time. Then, of course, property insurance. Again, with property insurance, there's this co-insurance clause. So there's always, obviously, human nature, being what it is. We want to pay the minimum possible for insurance, which means that if left to our own devices without any incentivizing mechanism, we're going to buy the minimum insurance that we could get away with to cover our property. So, for example, house that you buy. So how does the insurance company force us to buy appropriate amount of insurance? Well, they do so with this idea of co-insurance. So what they'll tell you is that you need to have insurance at any point, say for your home, covering at least 80% of the current economic value of your house. So your insurance amount, so if your house is currently worth $200,000, then you got to have insurance for at least $160,000 covering that property. And if you don't, then you fall under what is called co-insurance. You are underinsured in that case, in which case the insurance company will not pay you for the entire amount of damages because you are underinsured. You will fall under what is called the co-insured clause, and so they're going to use that to pay only a proportion of your damages as long as you are underinsured. And that's one way of the insurance company in incentivizing you to buy the appropriate amount of insurance. So if you're covered for $160,000 or more, then you fall under full insurance protection. If you're below, so 80%. At any point, if you're below 80%, you will fall under, you'll be defined as having underinsurance, or you're underinsured. These days, again, a lot of insurance companies automate this process. So they're going to keep track, their computer programs keep track of economic value of properties in your area, and they will, your insurance agent will contact you from time to time to make sure that you are covered appropriately. So that's really a job of an insurance agent. Somebody who is more, more sort of proactive will keep track of their clients and make sure that they're covered at any point. So it's not something that you have to keep track of, but it's good to know the problems. Homeowners insurance are broadly in these three categories. The HO4 covers renters insurance. So if you are renting an apartment, then you can buy renters insurance. Now there's a common misconception, maybe not so much in this class, but in the past certainly. People feel that, oh, if the property owner has insurance, then why do I need renters insurance in my own unit? And the answer is very simple. The property owner does have property insurance. There's no doubt about it, but that insurance does not cover inside the units. It covers broad structural damage of the property as such overall, but let's say you start a fire in your unit and things get burned within your apartment, then property owner's insurance policy is not going to cover that stuff inside your property. If to the extent that the whole building is damaged, then property owner's insurance covers, but if it comes out from the police inspection and fire inspection that it was your negligence that caused it, then the blame comes down to you. The insurance company will come after you to collect. They will pay for damages, but then they will sue you to collect. So you're under risk if you live, and for example, if somebody breaks into your apartment and steals your collection of music or whatever else, the property owner's insurance policy is not going to cover that. So again, your renter's insurance will cover that. So it's good to keep those distinctions in mind. HO5 is the standard homeowner's insurance policy, and HO6 is the condo owner's. So if you live in a condominium, then you buy HO6. Okay. And so here are the perils in property. I'm just going to go quickly over these. Property loss, liability, section 2. Perils rarely covered are floods, earthquakes, acts of war. You need separate coverage for that. So if you happen to live in an area that's defined as a floodplain, then you need additional flood insurance coverage. And this is a common example that's used to tell you about the differences. When the Hurricane Katrina occurred a few years ago in New Orleans, if you recall, a lot of people in the 8th district that got wiped out, they had insurance. Most of them had insurance policies. They were poor neighborhoods, but they had insurance. But the problem was the damage was deemed to have been done by flooding, not by the initial hurricane didn't damage the property. What damaged and destroyed property was the flooding that occurred. And so one needed to have flood coverage, additional flood coverage to be appropriately protected, which most of these people did not have because they didn't want to spend the extra money to buy flood protection. So there was that technicality in which most of these people, thousands of people, families, were denied coverage because the cause was deemed to be flooding after the hurricane or the tornado. Was it a hurricane or a tornado? Hurricane, yes. So the hurricane, the damage caused by, so the hurricane did not cause the damage, it was the flooding after that caused it. So it was a technicality. You might think potato, potato, but in the insurance world, that matters. And so if you did not, that was considered to be, so if you know New Orleans is like a bowl. It's like a bowl with all the French quarters and all are on the high ground, and then all the poor sections around the levees are in the bottom of the bowl. And so when the dams burst, the levees burst, all the water came in and filled the bowl, and that was basically what caused all this damage in this low-lying property. And so people needed to have flood coverage in addition to their homeowner's insurance policy to be adequately covered, which most of these people did not have because they could barely survive on money there. So they bought insurance, homeowner's insurance, thinking they were protected, and they were protected from most other things except for what happened. So it's a good lesson to keep in mind as to how things can be interpreted. And you may think, oh, well, they should be covered. They had homeowners insurance. They were damaged by this whole hurricane thing. They should be, and no, and that was not how it was interpreted by the insurance companies. So that's kind of a sobering reminder, if you will. Okay, so here are some details on what's covered, what's not. Usually, what is?
What is that one for 75% of the policy? What does that mean?
So let's see where we're. Oh, okay, yeah. Reimbursement will be limited to 75% of the policy amount. So this is just a rule that they're not going to pay 100%. They're going to cover for the most normal property. They're going to give you only 75%. Again, this is a way for the insurance company to hold you accountable for. They're not going to pay you 100%. So this is another way to disincentivize irresponsible behavior, or to make sure that if there are damages, you pay for part of it as well. They will cover some. So it's sort of like the co-insurance idea we've talked about. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is that if you have some very non-standard items in your house, which are expensive, heirlooms and things, you need to have separate floaters to cover those things. The normal policy will not cover them. So you need to have pictures taken. They need to be professionally appraised. And then those things need to be filed, and you need to pay for special protection for that particular item. So if you have heirloom jewelry, for example, it's very expensive, then one way to get coverage for that is to have it professionally appraised, get the value for that as determined by a certified jeweler, and then that claim, that needs to be filed with the insurance company so that if something happens to it, then you are adequately protected. That requires separate floater purchase on top of your insurance. Okay. And again, locations covered. So you can, when you're away in college and you're under your parents' insurance policy, then you have limited coverage in your dorm room or wherever you are here away from your parents' home, but it's only limited. It's very limited, and you need to be aware or have the insurance agent spell out what those are. And they're different for different policies, but they have limited coverage. So it's better, if you can afford it, to have a separate property, like a renter's insurance here, so that you're adequately covered. That's what insurance agents will tell you. And they're quite affordable. Renter's insurance runs like somewhere between $12 and $20 a month for a large amount of coverage. So it's not that inexpensive, and especially if you have expensive items in your apartment, then it's probably worth the risk of worth the money. All right, so here's some internal limits example, how much is covered under a normal policy. I'll just skip through that. What are your rights as a renter? I'm going to skip through most of this, but you can read through it and see if some of these apply to you. But basically, the idea is that you have lots of rights as renters. There are certain things that landlords are expected to do and not do, and they may violate those conditions, and you can see if some of these apply to you, and I'm happy to discuss it if you have any specific concerns. But I'm going to just leave that, move on. Are there questions? Are pets considered? No, pets are not considered property. Pets are not property. In fact, the problem is that some people consider them as property, which is wrong and leads to animal abuse. So does it affect credit score? Does what affect credit score? I have no idea. What happens if water damage is due to structural faults and lack of maintenance? Again, that might qualify. Now, one thing, I've talked to several agents, and in fact, we'll try to see if we can get an insurance agent here who actually was a student of this course years ago to come and talk to you guys at some point. But what he'll tell you all the time is that there's a there's a mistaken belief that any kind of normal wear and tear of an item, household item, falls under insurance, and that is just not true. So if you buy a heat pump, for example, or let's say a water heater, and the water heater fails after 10 years, and you file an insurance claim like under your homeowner's policy, you're not going to get reimbursed because that's a wear and tear issue. Yes?
So something like the house collapses.
Yeah, if the house collapses and the house was it's an old house that collapsed, it's not covered. But if it collapses, it gets hit by lightning, even that is questionable, because if it's deemed to be an act of God or a pure accident, then it's not going to be covered. So there are all these fine things that you have, fine line that you have to obey, or you fall under. So they're just not going to hand over a check. Let's put it this way. Yes.
Is act of God an actual term?
No, act of God is actually used. It just means a pure accident. Nobody could have foreseen that. Yeah, I mean, so, yeah, no, it is actually used. I'm glad you asked that. Act of God simply means it's a totally random act that could not have been prevented. It's just something we couldn't, and insurance companies are not expected to pay out under those conditions. So, yeah, that kind of, because we sort of are in this mindset that if you have insurance, somebody got hurt, somebody has to pay. The insurance company, it's not quite as simple. Insurance companies are not going to just roll over and write you a check just because you filed a claim and you have a policy. You know, maybe that's why they are a profitable industry, because they're not just writing out checks. Yes, so the question is, does the same appraisal process need to be done if, say, your laptop has added value because of added memory? In general, if you have a very expensive laptop because you work in 3D graphics, or you have, you know, a souped-up laptop which is, you know, way more expensive than a standard laptop, yeah, it's probably a good idea to have it appraised to make sure that all the added stuff that's in it gets properly accounted for. So if it gets stolen, that you will get a replacement of the same kind. Because if you don't, and then let's say your laptop gets stolen and you tell your agent, oh, by the way, the appraiser, the insurance company appraiser, oh, by the way, this laptop had X, Y, Z on top of, you know, what the insurance company would sign off for, then the agent will look at you, the appraiser will look at you and say, prove it. You know, you got to prove it that you have all this stuff in it. Otherwise, you know, and if you do have something that's considered non-standard, whatever that means, and they'll be happy to explain that to you, so which means more expensive, then you needed to have filed a claim with the agent or file that information with your agent prior to the thing being stolen. So, so those kind of things are considered to be, yeah, something that you need to act beforehand and make sure that it's on file as something in case just something happens to it. What about pets that are essential to income, such as show animals? Wow, this is really, you know, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. If you have show animals, then it's better to talk to your insurance agent and see if you can get special care, protection or coverage for them. And that's all I can say. And there are, you know, Lloyd's of London is known for covering all these unusual type insurance-related activities like hole-in-one in golf tournaments. A lot of golf tournaments have these kind of hole-in-one prizes that if you can make a hole-in-one in a golf tournament, then you get an added payout, a payday. And those kind of insurance clause protections are provided by Lloyd's of London. They usually cover NASCAR races and IndyCar races and all these things. So those, so maybe there is one. The news sometimes shows vehicles driven into buildings by accident or reasons other than. Are these acts of God? I don't know. I have to look at specific instances. I cannot answer the question. But a lot of times when vehicles are driven into buildings, chances are that alcohol is involved somewhere in or other forms of prescription and non-prescription medication. So chances are that it's not God, but it's pharmaceuticals. So God was busy elsewhere that day. But so I don't know. So I don't mean to be glib about this. I'm just saying that not knowing, the serious answer is not knowing what happened. It's hard to answer these questions. Is there some kind of property insurance that covers the property no matter what the cause? No. Insurance companies are not going to be silly enough to write covers that says, oh yeah, the sky's the limit, just hit us. If they do, then the premium is going to be so high on that it's probably not going to be affordable or worth having it.
This is
what is the difference between owning a condo and an apartment? The difference is that when you, and I don't know if there are any condo owners in this room, but if there are, can you identify yourself if you don't mind? Okay, nobody wants to. Condo owners means it's different from owning a property, because condo owners, it's a hybrid between renting and owning. So there are certain parts of a condo that you own, then there are certain parts that are maintained by the condo. And so there's public property and private property in condominiums. And so that's why the condominium is treated separately from renting or owning property. Okay, so that's why it's a separate category. Because condominium, if you look at what is considered to be owned by the condo owner and what is not, there are things that are public, that are not owned by you, even though it's within the condominium, this area, and then there are other things that are owned by you as the owner of the condominium. So there's kind of a hybrid. Condos are considered to be a hybrid between owning property and renting property, and that's why it's in its own separate category. What happens if you have renter's insurance but your roommates don't? That can be a problem, right? You've faced that. You want to share?
Oh, thank you. All right, so I've got a couple of experiences with this. So, yeah, I've got a couple of experiences with some roommates having renter's insurance, or even friends. So, what was it? Last year, I'll talk about the story of a friend. So, this friend's roommates had some other people over, and people got wasted, really drunk, and they ended up getting into some altercations with police, and it was a really bad deal, and these guests, trashed the apartment and stole my friend's stuff. Well, after the dust settled from that, it turns out my friend's roommate had renter's insurance, but my friend did not, and he tried to see if he could claim his stolen things
Just live by yourself, right?
roommate's renter's insurance, but you can't do that. If you have renter's insurance, you cannot have your buddy claim his stuff if it gets stolen or broken. It just doesn't work like that. And if you try to do that and you get caught, well, I don't want to know about it.
Okay. All right. So I was looking at another question here while Michael was explaining his. And, so if your tree falls, that's typically, we'll talk about that tree falling on your car and when we talk auto insurance. In fact, there is a way that's covered. So we'll talk about that. Which insurance policy covers losses caused by natural disasters? You can buy actually coverage for like things like flooding and nuclear. You can buy nuclear protection coverage as well, but you can do earthquakes. You can actually cover for, but those are separate policies. It's for extra, however it is. You can ask your local insurance agent if you're interested. But yes, and if you're in California, I mean, you definitely, I think everybody has that as part of their coverage. Indiana has some fault lines running through it, so we are not really totally, secure from it. There's always a risk. Okay, moving on.
Where's your clicker?
Oh, we got it. So let's move to automotive insurance quickly. So here are the stats. I'm not going to belabor the point. The fact is that cars get stolen. Depending on the car you have, it probably is more. So here's a statistic. Escalades, for some reason, happen to be a favorite amongst thieves. So if you have an Escalade, you have to worry. Otherwise, you're fine. Well, no, not really. Toyota Camrys and Cadillac. We talked about Cadillac. So Camrys and Accords seem to be also in the list. So I'm safe. I don't have any of these. So it's good. Good to know that. And of course, if you live in a big city and all that stuff, the big city and the kind of car you drive, there's always. Okay, so here's the rule of thumb, and this is something that's I have been on the wrong end of this one in my life. So the car that's moving, here's the standard rule of thumb. The vehicle that's moving at the time the collision occurs is going to be the guilty party. It doesn't matter whether, so if you go hit somebody standing and you go hit you go do a fender bender on somebody who's standing, it doesn't matter that that person wasn't supposed to be standing, it was supposed to be driving and just for whatever reason chose to brake, unknown to you, out of the blue, act of God. The person stopped. And you hit that person, well, no, it's not act of God for you. You're going to be blamed for it. So, so in the auto insurance world, it pays to stand still. So it really does. I mean, so if whichever vehicle is not moving at the time of the accident is going to be in the clear for most of 99% of the cases. I think 100% actually. I don't know of an exception to this rule. There might well be one, but I'm not aware.
What happens if you like pull out and just stop in the middle of the road?
It doesn't matter.
Still their fault? Like,
Yes.
you're-
Let's say, I've seen this happen actually. There's an old person driving the car, and for some reason, the middle of the road decided to stop, and the people behind it who are not paying attention, obviously, because you don't expect a car in the middle of the road to stop, just you went and plowed into it, and it was their fault. The idea was, it doesn't matter. You should have been paying attention. It's the other party's. Nobody knows why that person did it, but it's still your fault that you hit that person. So that's how it goes, sadly. I mean, we have an insurance agent coming in. Hopefully, we'll try to line one up, and you can ask this person the same question and see what he says. Yes, it's happened to me, actually, and I know I've been at the receiving end. I've been the one who hit somebody who wasn't supposed to be there, and it didn't matter. Okay. Part A, liability. So here are the 4 parts of the insurance: liability, medical payments, uninsured motorist coverage, and damage to your car. So liability is required. So this is the minimum coverage so if you're driving an old car, as I was when I was a student, grad student, so I had liability. That was all you need. And the idea is that your car is not covered unless, of course, somebody hits you and it's their fault, then of course you're covered. But liability usually is the cheapest and the most affordable, and the least amount of coverage that you can have to be legal on the roads. And that's there. And then policy limits of liability. Usually every state has a minimum required, which anybody will tell you is you should have more than this. This is like absolute bare minimum that doesn't cover almost anything. I mean, this is the minimum amount you need to renew your license from the BMV. That's basically it. So Indiana is 25, 50, 10, which means 25,000 bodily injury per person, 50,000 bodily injury per accident, and 10,000 property damage per accident. That's what the insurance company will cover, and anything more than that is your responsibility. So this is the minimum required. Illinois, it's 20, 40, 15. So every state has a different minimum required, and you can look it up. So I just chosen 3, and for no particular reason. Yes.
So let's say I'm from Illinois and I'm in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Which minimum do I have?
Yeah, because it depends on which if you are, I think the accident occurs. So if you're registered in Illinois and you're in Indiana and you hit Indiana, I believe the Indiana law is what will apply, even though you're registered in Illinois. I don't know. I'll have to check on that. That's not. I need to find that out. But because it depends on if you're in Illinois, what rule holds. If you're an Illinois registered plate and you're in Indiana, I do believe that where the accident occurs is where it is, but I won't. I'll have to double check that. So you keep anything extra. So the insurance company will exactly pay whatever it's legally required to pay under your policy, and anything more than that is your responsibility. So what people will tell you, agents will tell you, is that initially when you start, do whatever you can afford to get the coverage you can, and then keep increasing the coverage as you become more established in life, because lawyers look for these kind of opportunities. When there is an accident, they will look long and hard at your financial ability and decide whether it's worth their while to file a lawsuit against you. So if they see that you're a student with no particular ties to your parents or anything, then they might leave you alone because they know that it's not worth coming after you. You're not good for much. But if they can find a financial interest tying back to other people in your life who have more property or more money, then you are a candidate to be sued, somebody to file a lawsuit against you. So you need to be careful about that. So as you become more established, it's good to have better coverage just for those kind of possibilities. Uninsured motorist is something that most of us, I mean, it's a cheap, a few dollars extra in your policy, but it's well worth having, because if you get hit by somebody in a country road who doesn't have insurance, then this part of your policy kicks in, and then your insurance company will pay you and then go after that person legally to recover. So it's not your problem then. You get paid for your repairs, and then the insurance company goes after this other person. damage to your car pays the actual. So here you will see that collision and comprehensive. So this is what I was talking about. Somebody talking about a tree falling on your car. It's the comprehensive part that covers. If you have comprehensive in your collision and comprehensive. Collision is very expensive to have. It's the most expensive part of your policy. So usually you get collision if your car is relatively new or if your car is financed, bought with borrowed money. The bank will insist that you get full coverage, which includes collision, because obviously the bank is protecting its property. So because even as you well know, when you buy a car with a car loan, you do not own the car. The bank who's loaned you the money owns the title, has the title to the car. And the title will only be given to you after you've paid off the car in full, interest and principal. So that's when the title gets transferred to you. Otherwise, the title is held by the bank, which is true for homeowners policies too, by the way. When you loosely say you own your property, you actually don't until your house is totally paid off. If you have a loan on the house, a mortgage on the house, the bank technically owns your house. So the same thing here. So if your car happens to be financed, then you will have to have this full coverage, which includes collision and comprehensive. Comprehensive is for damages that happen while the car is standing still. So if your car is parked somewhere and a rock out of nowhere or whatever falls, or a branch falls on your windshield and cracks your windshield, then comprehensive is what will cover your replacement of the windshield. Collision is what happens when your car is in motion. So if you are backing into somebody or fronting into somebody, the collision part of your coverage will kick in there, because it'll be deemed your fault, and then your policy will cover you through the collision part. Because if it's not your fault for some reason, then the other party's insurance will cover you. Yes?
So how do they determine whether, like, let's say you're at the top of the hill, then you leave the car, you don't put on, like, parking brake, and it rolls down the hill and hits something. The car is in motion, but is that still just comprehensive?
That becomes a loan. So what will happen is there are some straightforward things where they know right away. Let's say something like that happens, then there's going to be what is called an appraiser. An appraiser is what is a detective. Basically, he or she is a detective. In fact, the person we were going to see if he's available to come, Neil, used to be an adjuster before he became an agent, and he was a student of this class, one of our majors, one of our graduates. And so he'll tell you that whenever it's a non-standard case, then adjusters get involved. And so they're going to nose around the car. They're going to see, okay, what could have happened. They're going to try to reconstruct the whole scene. They're going to talk to witnesses. They're going to try to put a case together and say, listen, you're claiming this, but this is what we think happened. And so we're going to reimburse you X dollars based on this, our findings. So then, and if they can show that there's negligence, then they can do a lot of things. So they may pay you just a fraction of it. They may say, listen, we think it's negligence here. You should have been more careful in parking, and you didn't. So then it becomes a financial detective work or insurance detective work, which is what adjusters do. They're trained to do this. And then decide what is a fair claim in this process, and then you have a right to appeal. Then they'll have an arbitration, all kinds of stuff. Or you can accept what you got and all's fine. If not, you can file a claim and give your reasons for why you think this is. So it gets messy after that. Then it becomes a legal issue and lawyers get involved. So did I answer your question? Yeah. Cool. All right. So and this is pretty standard procedure. I'm not going to belabor the point here, but when things happen, bad things happen, and all of us carry cell phones now, take pictures immediately, because you never know how it's going to all be. Because obviously, your view might be different from the other person's. They might tell a whole different story than you. So it's usually, taking pictures helps. So take your phone out and take as many pictures as you can of what happened, so that at least you have visual images of the damage and maybe even some way to establish the other person was at fault, things like that. So, if somebody crossed over the lane and hit you, they may deny it later. They may say, oh, I didn't do anything, it just happened. And so if you have a picture showing that the car actually crossed the lane and came and hit you, then those things help in terms of deciding. So get as much detail, call the police, wait, and usually the police report will tell you, so the police will come and they will make sketches and take pictures of their own. And I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but the report will have, final police report will have all kinds of diagrams and all that as to what happened. So it is something that the police, takes a while for the police to do this because it is a lot of work. But that also gets filed along with the insurance claim in terms of deciding how much to pay and who gets reimbursed what and things like that. So the police report also helps in determining who's at fault, because we are an at-fault state here. So they have to sort of, divvy up the fault, whose fault, and that will play into how much insurance money will be given out and things. Okay, so so auto insurance premiums. So there are obviously some of these are common sense. You can tell where the car will be driven, how many miles will it be driven, characteristics of the drivers, meaning, have you had a prior record, are you a good student, those kind of things, type of the car you're driving. Everybody knows that if you have a high performance car, then that's considered to be, that calls for a high premium in your insurance. Coupled with the fact that you're a young driver driving a high performance car, that is a double whammy in terms of insurance premiums. And then insurance driving record. So if you've had other tickets, other violations, well, that pretty much adds to the picture. So these are some of the major characteristics on which the insurance premium will depend. So here are some ways to help these costs down, to keep these costs down. If you take driver's ed, especially this is true for students and people who are younger than 25 and so on, which I suspect most of you are in this room. So take driver's ed, take defensive driving, be a good student in school. So the idea is that anything that shows you're responsible, that's the goal here. So good student means you're responsible, that's the implication. Have airbags and security system in your car. Anything that shows that the driver is responsible and that the car has, all these protection devices, means that if there is an accident, the cost will be relatively low to fix it. Those are kind of things that insurance companies use to factor in your premium. So if you have all the airbags and all the side curtains and all, as they call it, and all that stuff, the new equipment, all that comes in, the safety equipment, then you're going to get a discount on your premium because those things will help in keeping the costs low for your car in case of a damage, accident. And then, of course, raise your deductibles and liability limits. If you raise your deductibles, that means you are retaining more of the risk yourself. It brings down insurance premiums. So that's one way to keep your costs low. So instead of having a $200 deductible, you have a $500 or $1,000 deductible, which means that the first $1,000 is your expense. And so that brings down your premium cost, insurance premium cost. Single people under 25 usually pay more. Guys are considered to be riskier. Women are responsible, so the rates are lower. Under 25, if you get married, rates will go down. Now, this is a perverse incentive. This doesn't mean you should get married, just to have your rates lower. But insurers considered married folk to be stable and thus less of a risk. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, golden age of 25, insurance will generally charge you, there'll be a rate drop at 25. Now the rate drop is usually less for females than males for obvious reason, because the rates are low to begin with for females because they are responsible and do the right things more often than we do. So, all right. Okay. Michael, you've been busy typing away. I've been hearing click, click of...
So here's one.
Do I have to pay extra if I'd like to? No, I'm not aware of you having to pay. So if you have a household driver, like so you're part of it, it's good to have them included in the list of drivers, so that if somebody else is handling the car and it gets into an accident, there's no questions asked. There are no implications on rates as far as I'm aware. That's the other question. Commonly mentioned the rates decrease once you become how significant. So we just talked about it, so I think your question was answered, hopefully. What about driving someone else's car? So as long as you're driving somebody else's car with that person's permission, it's good. It shouldn't matter at all. What's the best way to handle an insurance claim if you are in an incident yet need to be at the place you're
If you're in
going?
an accident and you're about to have a baby.
Whoa, if the birth of your baby, I have no idea. I am flummoxed. Okay, so which insurance comes into play if you are parked in a parking space and someone hits your car? That's a hit and run. Is that comprehensive? I believe it is comprehensive. And hit and run means that person, there's going to be insurance is going to be the least of that person's problem if they get caught. So that is a whole different ballgame, because hit and run is considered extremely seriously in this country, and especially if there's damage, and especially if there's human damage. That is a stupidest move one can do, and especially if you do it, make sure that you can never be caught or never be found. But other than that, that is a silly move. If you panic, that just makes things so much worse. That is, if you've been unlucky enough to get into a situation like that, it's better to stop. Make sure that person, if you've hurt somebody, make sure you call 911. Those things will help you, actually, even though it's going to be your fault. If there's a case after that, the judge will look at you with some degree of kindness. But if you do not behave responsibly after that, it's compounding an already bad situation. So please do not ever do that, especially if you've hurt somebody and you see them and you run away. That is just a horrible situation. You've made a bad situation so much worse by just doing that. So try not to panic and just be there and do the right thing, and I think it'll help you in the end. All right. Rest you can handle, right? Does insurance ever cover items inside the car like luggage or GPS devices? GPS is now built into most of these things, so if there's a damage and obviously the equipment is part of it, and your GPS stops working as it. Again, this is something that adjusters or appraisers, loan appraisers look for, and they will determine, because a lot of times, and I've been told this many times, people have prior accidents, prior damage from accidents and stuff. They try to lump into the current one, and they say, oh yeah, this all happened together because you want everything get fixed at the same time, all of it. And insurance companies know this. So, and adjusters know this, and they work with that. So they will try to determine which one. So they'll say, okay, these things happened, we determined this as part of this accident. All this other stuff that you're claiming actually is not part of this, and we refuse to pay for all that. And then it's up to you to appeal if you want to take that route. But insurance companies are well aware that it's a human instinct for us to, when we have an accident, to say, oh, there was a ding on the other side, we'll just claim that as well. That happened as part of the accident. They may have happened entirely in a different time and different occasion, and insurance companies are onto it, and they are extremely aware of these kind of things, that people do that, so they're very careful about that. I don't recommend getting into an accident, least of all with a cop car. Been there, done that. Yes, don't ever. Now, I'll tell you a cop story. So, not too long ago, this is probably a couple of months back, my wife and I had gone to Indianapolis, and we were coming back. We took the 175 exit. And as I took the exit, there was a big white pickup truck right behind me. So as I turn into 43 or whatever that road is when you come out of 175, he turns on his light. So I realize a cop car, and he stops me. So I pull up, and then so it's broad daylight. It's like 2:30 in the afternoon or something, somewhere in that range on Saturday or Sunday afternoon. So I roll down my window. This guy walks over, and he says, "Come on out of the car." Okay, now this is problem, right? A red flag, because policemen normally don't ask you to come out of your car unless they are, So I come out of I get out, and he says, "Come back to the truck with me." Okay. At this point, I'm like, okay, this is not looking good. The only thing I know is that it's broad daylight, this car's passing by. I walk over, I say, I need to talk to my wife. I go over to her and I say, listen, I don't know what's going to happen. If something happens, you drive and get out of this place, okay? So I almost said goodbye to her. I said, I don't know, this guy wants me in his truck. He has guns, and he's a cop. And he wants me to go in the cab with him, in his cab. I mean, this is a big white, like a Dodge something, Ram, one of those things. And so I was scared, all right? And so, so I tell Ajita, oh, well, just run. If something happens to me, you see something strange, just try to get in the driver's seat and drive. Don't stop. So then I walk back into his thing, and I sit on the passenger side, right? So he is running my plate. He's running my plate, and he's making small talk with me while he's doing this. He's like, oh, so what do? You teach at Purdue. Oh, okay, you're a Purdue professor. So what do you think of the economy? Oh, you're a financial economist, right? So, okay, so what do you think of the stock market? He's doing this, right? And after a couple of minutes, I said, listen, would you mind if I don't do this small talk stuff? Because I'm really not in a mood. Okay, so then he looks at me and says, why, you think I'm not up to your class? That you're a Purdue professor and I'm just a cop, so I'm not educated enough for you to talk? So it's like he's baiting me on, right? And so I said, no, it's nothing like that. Please, this is not a healthy situation that I'm in. I'm not just in a mood to have this conversation. That's all there is to it. There's nothing to do with education or difference in class or whatever. So I'm trying to keep my voice down. I'm keeping speaking because it almost seems to me like he's trying to pick a fight with me. And I'm, did I mention he had a gun? And I'm in his cab, sitting on the passenger side, door closed. Okay. So he could easily shoot me and say, hey, I was provoked. He was reaching for something, right? You read all this. And all this thing is playing in my head at this point, right? You read about this. Somebody's reaching. I mean, he can always say, this guy reaching. So what if he didn't have a gun? I didn't know that. I thought he was going to kill me. So self-defense. I shot him. So I'm trying to stay very calm, talking in a low voice, Then I can hear, and he ran the plates. So then it comes back negative, and so he looks at me, and after a while I said, I can. Do you have anybody to give you a ride? Because and I did have expired plates. I'd forgotten to renew them, so they were expired. So he says, I got expired plates on you, and so do you have anybody to come and give you a ride? Because I need to impound this vehicle right now. Do you have anybody to come and pick you up from here? And we're standing on the side of, just next to I-65 after 175 exit. So I said, no, we have nobody. I mean, there's nobody to come and give us a ride back. So then he kind of, it's like a cat and mouse game. I'm getting the feeling that he's just toying with me. It's like, cats do with little mice and all that. You just paw it around and then eventually, hit it, give it the deadly blow. So that's the feeling I'm having. He's just toying with me. He's got all the power. I have nothing, and I'm just there, for his entertainment. And he's just having fun at my expense. So then he kind of thinks about it, and it comes back, and I can hear it because I'm sitting next to him, right? So I can hear the dispatcher going, there's nothing there, it's a clean record. So then he says, well, I'm going to give you, finally, after all this, he says, okay, I'm going to give you a warning. Get that thing fixed. So he writes me a warning. I walk out of the car and get into my car, and I'm driving back. And then suddenly I see from the back, and I see a group of young college kids drive by me because he's behind me. It's an unmarked truck, right? So nobody knows other than me because we're starting to drive back and he's behind me all the while, right? And so I'm watching him from the rear view mirror, and then this car goes by with about 5 kids in it. And I tell my wife, he's going to go after them in a second. Sure enough, as soon as I finish speaking, he just zooms from behind me, turns on his lights, and pulls those kids over. And I'm like, I don't know what happened. Of course, I didn't stick around to watch that, but this was my experience, and it was scary as heck. I don't know. I mean, I knew the guy's name. I thought of filing a complaint, but I didn't. I just let it go. But that's my story, and it scared the living daylights out of me. So anyway, so let's end here on this note.